What is up, YouTube, and welcome to the second video series of my contest prep. Now, for anyone who showed support to the first video, honestly, massive appreciation. It is a huge leap for me to record these videos and to document and showcase more of my, life behind the scenes per se. I wanted to use this video as a little bit more of an evaluation of where we're at the 3-week out mark. Whereas the previous video that I uploaded was a little bit more of a, typical kind of day in the life. We're certainly approaching the pointy end of contest prep at this point in time, and there is really that kind of intricate, push and pull of the protocol and the strategy. And I thought it would be interesting to sort of, run you through what a check-in would look like for myself. I am self-coached. However, I do have individuals in my corner that provide immense support for me, such as my beautiful partner, Nicole, and also, Brandon and Rach from BK Conditioning, who I work with. But basically what I wanted to do here is to kind of, take you through a bit of a check-in at 3 weeks out from the first show of the season. We got a jam-packed season coming up. We have 3 shows in mind. So we have the first show, which is the NPC Naturals, which is the 13th of July, 3 weeks out. We then have the weekend after, which is a pro qualifier. It's the NPC Naturals over in Taiwan. And then basically 2 weekends after that, we have the WNBF Malaysia show. Now this time around, in terms of my category of choice, I'm looking at specifically focusing on classic physique, whereas in my previous season, obviously competed as a bodybuilder. I feel like classic physique is something that I feel more aligned with, and I feel like my physique is more specifically suited, for that look. And it's also something that I feel like comes from my, my roots in bodybuilding. Like my first ever interest in bodybuilding as a whole comes from people like, Arnie, Franco, things like this as an example, that real kind of golden era. And so, feeling very aligned to classic physique for this season, which I'm very excited for. And, basically wanted to jump into, what a check-in looks like for myself. Now, the way in which I would look at conducting a check-in over the course of the week is, check-in for me is typically on a Sunday. I run a midweek review with Brandon. On a Friday, we catch up every Friday there to kind of talk about where our athletes are at, and also discuss, where we're at in terms of our respective timelines. But typically on a Sunday, what I'd do here is I'd sit down and I'd evaluate, the data over the course of the week here on my sort of coach's dashboard, my athlete management system. If you've watched the previous video that I uploaded, pretty much each morning, I upload my data there in terms of my training, nutrition, sleep, steps, and posing. And that's in fact what I would consider to be the 5, pillars of contest prep: training, nutrition, sleep, steps, and posing. And basically that's how I look at evaluating myself over the course of the week, how I've conducted myself as an athlete. And I do a bit of a gap analysis to, determine, gap being GAP, good, average, poor, to determine what areas I can potentially improve upon and, be that 1% better as, from an athlete perspective. So let's kind of, jump into the check-in here. Now, as I mentioned, we're currently sitting at 3 weeks out from the first show of the season. And just for sort of context, basically commenced contest prep on the 23rd of December, right before Christmas, and obviously the festivities there. But we're currently sitting at around 26 weeks of dieting so far, which is crazy. This timeline is just, as we know, contest prep is just something that absolutely flies. You blink and all of a sudden you're like me, three weeks out from the first show of the season. But over the course of the week here, basically what I've done, and we'll start with nutrition, sort of evaluating, where things are at from a nutritional perspective. But, Monday, the 16th of June there, and also Thursday, the 19th of June there, I run basically a double refeed strategy. This is something that I've been able to maintain for majority of contest prep. I've had the luxury of retaining sort of 2 high days within the week. We would deem a refeed strategy as basically a day somewhat close to caloric predicted maintenance. And the strategy or the premise behind a refeed is to essentially have a day within the week, which is somewhat of a stepping stone in the diet condition to bolster and protect performance, kind of protect the look. it can assist in multiple ways. I truly believe, not so much from the presence of metabolic rate preservation, which I think is something that, based on research kind of depicts, is potentially not the case. Refeeds maybe don't look at preserving metabolic rate per se, but can certainly help in preserving performance and keeping you afloat from a psychological perspective. So essentially, over the course of the last week, I ran a refeed on the Monday there, and that sort of coincided after three days of depletion. So depleted on the Friday, the Saturday, and the Sunday of last week. Probably, or basically pretty assertive in terms of the push there. 2,100 calories. We're talking 12K steps on training day, 14K steps on rest day, and took that refeed on the Monday and didn't really feel a whole lot. Did not really gain much in terms of, fullness. But, I've got a little bit more to go in terms of the conditioning component. So we sort of pressed on, pushed on, and then looked at running the follow-on refeed on the Thursday of this week. So basically, the most flat that I've been through the course of prep makes sense, being obviously progressively getting leaner through the course of prep. But it was a sense of flatness that I couldn't really regain quickly from. Now, typically, even a single refeed for me usually does quite a lot in terms of restoration to the look. And the allotment of photos that I took on the Friday morning that Brandon and I reviewed didn't really gain a whole lot in terms of that look, and had a very flat look through the quads, which I'm going to showcase in terms of pictures there. But in terms of the sort of look that I had regained, it wasn't really much. And so we essentially looked to aim at putting forth a second refeed on the Friday and evaluated the look in the morning. Still didn't regain a whole lot. Still had that kind of very flat, very depleted look. And then followed that up with an actual third, refeed day or third loading day. Now, with that in mind, being 3 weeks out, the utility of running back-to-back refeeds not only helps us from the perspective of, preserving the look, protecting performance, protecting lean tissue, but it also acted as a pretty cool strategy to assess, how many days of loading with roughly around, the carbohydrates that we're, intaking, enables me to kind of climb out of the hole of, the diet condition, so to speak. So with that in mind, I basically had consumed around 1,200 grams of carbohydrates across those 3 days, 3 days straight of loading 400s, and only started to sort of regain some fullness upon that third day. Still not in a position where I've regained that sort of real full look that I would want to display in terms of a peak week strategy, but it's very cool data to be able to collect at 3 weeks out. And I've got the sort of flexibility to, I guess, sort of strategize this sort of stuff because I'm in a position from a conditioning standpoint that enables me to be a little bit more forgiveful when it comes to my protocol, in that I've got time to refine my conditioning a little bit further, which I'd say at this point in time, currently sitting at around sort of 98% there, a little bit more to go through the posterior chain until we are ultra crispy. But also considering classic physique, I don't necessarily need to showcase the upper glute in terms of conditioning. Is that potentially an area that requires further conditioning if it's not an area that I'm going to physically display on stage? And this is where it comes down to kind of balancing, conditioning, fullness. And we could say that the further we push conditioning, the higher possibility there is of losing lean tissue. And so ultimately, these next 3 weeks from a nutritional perspective is really going to be a bit of a balancing act as a whole. So I guess, evaluating the course of the week here, we ran in essence 4 loading days. So one on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was low days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday with 3 loading days or 3 refeeds. And then today, as of the 22nd of June, we're running our everyday nutrition, or back to sort of depletion again. What this week has kind of taught me is that the refeed strategy that I put forth, I may be able to be a little bit more generous with the amount to be able to assess my response into the coming week. So I will actually be nudging my refeed macros from 400 more so up to around 480, which is like 5 grams per kilo body weight a little bit more up towards the 6 and assessing the look there. And then what I'm also looking at doing is decreasing my step outputs and slightly increasing my everyday nutrition, thereby resulting in me not necessarily pushing as hard into the depleted state over the course of the week. So a 25 gram bump up to carbohydrates on my daily protocol, and also a slight decrease to steps, whereas previously it was 12K training, 14K rest day. We're running 10K, training and 12K on rest days. So it is a little bit of a bolster or a protection of my physique with a kind of give back strategy, because realistically, I potentially don't need to be pushing as hard at this point in time to preserve that look. And that's coming from both, nutrition and adjustment to training, nutrition and step, variables. Now, in terms of, and that's kind of, where we're at. So currently sitting at 81 on average. We're sitting at 81.1 over the course of the week there. So, I deem that sort of my 100% is probably going to be sitting in the 80 kilo mark, and with a full loading strategy upon peak week, I anticipate that my weight will probably climb up a little bit more towards sort of, the 81, somewhere around there. So that's kind of where we're at from a nutritional perspective. In terms of the adjustments, the increase in carbohydrates to the everyday nutrition, the adjustment or increase to the strategy surrounding the refeeds, the foods themselves don't really, change at all. And if you watched my last video, you'd see the average day of consumption in terms of my, my daily intake. Nothing changes in that regard. Sleep is still the time machine to oats in the AM, maybe just a little bit more. And perhaps the only thing that's changed from a nutritional perspective is simply perhaps the place in which I'm eating it in the house. Lounging, chilling out on the couch, consuming my meals, as opposed to, sitting at the bench, just to change in location, change things up. That's about the only adjustment piece. But that kind of wraps up, where we're at from a nutritional perspective. What we'll do here now is we'll jump into some training footage. And this footage comes about from yesterday's third posterior chain day. It was an epic session, a collaborative piece between, glutes, hamstrings, back, and then a bit of, delts and arms and calves to finish that off. We wrap things up with some posing, which I'll document as well, with Nicole calling out some rounds. She's been absolutely immense, obviously being in my corner from the very beginning. Sees and evaluates my physique every single day. Certainly evaluates my mood, but has been an immense support. And I'm incredibly lucky to have a partner that understands, all aspects of the Contest Prep journey and, lives the lifestyle with me, right? So yeah, incredibly grateful for her. But let's jump into that training footage now. New activity music. This is one of my routines.
Quarter turn to the right. Quarter turn to the right, facing rear. Quarter turn to the right. Quarter turn to the right, facing front. And again, front double by. Quarter turn, side chest. Facing rear, back double by. Half turn, abs and thighs. And favorite classic pose. And relax.
All right, that wraps up training and posing. As I mentioned, it was an immense session, certainly more fullness to the physique, vascularity to the physique within that session itself post the 3 refeed days. As I did mention, there is definitely more room to load up as we do approach the peak week, and certainly the data that I've collated and collected over these last couple of days has been beneficial to help me assess the protocol necessary to showcase my best, on that stage. But that pretty much wraps up a 3-week out review of where we're at in terms of the Conus Prep timeline. Thank you so much to anyone who shows support to these videos. Honestly, anyone who reaches out, sends messages, and just has, such kind words to say, it's incredibly appreciated. As I mentioned, I'm not someone who is very extroverted in nature. I don't tend to put my life out there in terms of how I conduct myself, as a coach or as an athlete, and mostly. And so, yeah, it is incredible just to receive so many, positive affirmations and nice words as well. So if you love today's video, give us a subscribe, and of course, add any sort of comments, things that you'd like me to document as we move closer towards the show. I intend on trying to capture more of the peak week strategy, also capturing the show days as well, the international travel coming up to Taiwan and also Malaysia, and then hoping to capture, and keep it real in terms of the recovery phase as well. I think that's mostly a phase which, falls on deaf ears, and the smoke and mirrors of the recovery phase or the celebrations post-show can sometimes cloud what struggles competitors truly go through. And I myself also being, someone who is likely going to have some difficulties or some issues in the recovery phase, because we're not all immune to the last 26 weeks plus of dieting to get down to suboptimal levels of body fat. I've always said that Conus Prep is somewhat like a rubber band effect. The more you stretch that band, the more it is essentially going to slap you. So, we're trying to stay and remain focused on the task at hand, but I want to try and keep it as real as possible in terms of the awesome aspects, the recovery phase, but also the struggles that do come with balancing out your homeostasis and returning back to normal again. So yes, thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next video.